Welcome to the Bouquet Toolkit. This is part 2 of a series of 5 videos that is aiming to give you all of the basics to make most of my floral arrangements. I'll be linking to it regularly throughout all my tutorials. And this video is going to show you how to make my standard Novella book page rose on foil and my English rose on foil. So to make book roses, obviously you'll need an old book. Now you can use hardback books or paperback books, but if you're just starting out, I do recommend that you just pick up any old book from a second-hand shop. You can then use this to practice with and just perfect your techniques. It may take 1 or 2 goes to create a perfect rose, but it is totally doable. If you'd like a little bit more background information on the paper, you can go to my FAQ section where I've got a full FAQ about paper. But if you need a specific paper for any of my arrangements, I will specify in the individual tutorials as well. So for the Novella book rose and the English book rose, you will need to use petal template number 1. The link to download this is in the video description, and I've also detailed all the information about it in part 1 of this toolkit series. So the first thing you need to do is tear 4 pages together from your book. I found that 4 pages is the optimum number to get a good cut without getting a burr around the edge of the petals. So keeping all of the 4 pages together so that they are nicely aligned, simply fold it in half. And then take your petal template and align it up to the edge. Now I normally leave a little gap at the bottom. It won't always be possible, it will depend on the size of your book, but leaving a little gap on the bottom is totally fine. And then cut around your template, and each cut will give us 8 petals, and normally we'll need about 21 petals for each rose. But if you accidentally make some of the petals too close together, you may need to add 1 or 2 extra. So it's always good to have a few spares, especially when you're making several roses. So I've already outlined the basic equipment that you'll need for the Bouquet Toolkit, and for this stage of the process you'll need to hand some sewing thread and your wallpaper paste. And you'll also need a foil stem for each of the book page roses. If you don't know how to make these, just refer to part 1 of the video, and I've put the timestamps in the video description so you can jump straight to how to make these foils. So once all your petals are cut, we'll simply lay them out in front of us, and what I normally do is lay them out in 3 rows of 6 petals. With 2 extra to the right hand side and all of the spares to the left. Now the very first petal we'll use we'll take from the spares pile. And what you want to do is hold your finger and thumb at the top of the petal in the middle, and then curl the petal over from the right hand side to the middle at the top to create a little point, and then keep rolling the petal over itself so that we've got a little cone shape. Then take some of your wallpaper paste on the end of a paintbrush and just brush it around the inside of the cone shape. Take your foil stem and insert it into the cone shape, and then hold the petal at the bottom so that it doesn't unravel. And then using your sewing thread, we're just going to wind it around the base of this petal to hold it firmly in place. Now I'll wind it around all the way down to where the petal meets the foil. and then I'll pop it to one side. The next stage is to add some wallpaper paste to each of the petals in front of us. Now the wallpaper paste will start to absorb into the paper. That's fine, that's the whole point of using the wallpaper paste. Now I'll normally just wipe it down the bottom few centimetres of the middle of each petal. And then pick up your stem and taking the first petal from the bottom row, we want to align the base of the petal that we're holding and the base of the petal on the stem. And then pinch the petal, the new petal at the bottom, and kind of wrap it around the one that's on the stem, and we bind it in place with 3 or 4 turns of the thread. The next petal, we want to place it directly opposite the one we've just placed on the stem, and it's the same process. We just pinch it around at the bottom and wind the thread around. So for the next petal and all the rest of the petals in front of us, we want to align it so that the new petal, the very middle of the new petal, matches up with the very edge of the previous petal. And again, wind the thread around 2 or 3 times just to secure it in place. So all the subsequent petals need to be added in exactly the same way, and we'll just align each new petal, the middle of each new petal, with the very edge of the previous petal. Once we get to the last petal, we will add it in exactly the same way, but what we'll do is we'll wrap the thread around several more times and then bring the thread down to beneath where the petals are and wrap it around the foil a couple more times. Hold the end in place with your fingertips and snip the thread, and in the direction that you've wound the thread, brush on some of the wallpaper paste all around the thread and all around the bunchy bit, and the wallpaper paste should be gloopy enough to hold it all in place. So the next stage is to just push out the petals with your fingertips. You can push them out and pull them back up if they've gone too far, and what we want to do is we just want to create an aesthetically pleasing rose. So once it's at this stage and you're happy with the position of the petals, do put it to one side to let the wallpaper paste dry. If you try to move on to the binding before the petals have dried in place, it's quite easy to misalign them and it will ruin the overall effect of the rose. But as a general rule of thumb, I would leave them overnight. So to make the English rose, you will need to hand your wallpaper paste, some sewing thread, some scissors, a stick to curl the petals, and your foil stem. And you'll also need to have your petals that are cut from petal template number 1. So if you need help on cutting the templates and making the foil stems, then do check out video number 1 of the Bouquet Toolkit. And also, if you need to mix up the wallpaper paste, the full instructions for that are in the FAQ section. So for making the English roses from book pages, I do recommend that you use hardback books. Mostly because the paper in the hardback books is a lot thicker, and because it's thicker it holds the curls much better. So to make this rose you just need to lay out all of the petals in the usual manner. That's 3 rows of 6 petals with 2 extra to the right hand side and all the spares to the left. And then we want to take the first petal from the top row and we want to use our wooden stick to curl the edge. So what I'll normally do is I'll hold the stick at an angle to the left hand side and I'll simply roll down the petal around the wooden stick about halfway down on the left hand side, and it will curl around 3/4 along the top edge. Then simply remove your stick by sliding it out and the curl should stay in place. Now we want to repeat this process for every other petal on the top row. So for petals 1, 3, 5, and we'll also bring up the extra one to the right hand side and bring that up to the top row. On the middle row you want to do this process for petals number 2, 4 and 6. We're basically taking every other petal on the row and curling it on the left hand side. On the bottom row we'll take the 5th petal, the 3rd petal and the 1st petal. Now all of the petals that haven't got a curl on them, we want to do a similar process but on the right hand side. So roll the petal, the top of the petal, around your stick, pull out the stick until all of the petals have got a curl. So for the first 4 petals on the bottom row, we want to flip them over so that the curl is facing upwards. And then we'll take the first petal from our spares pile, and in the usual way we'll make a little cone shape. We'll pop in some wallpaper paste and insert the foil stem, and we'll bind that in place with the sewing thread. If you need more detailed instructions on how to place the first petal, then do use the timestamps in the description, because this process now is exactly the same as making the Novella rose. So we'll put a blob of wallpaper paste on each of the petals in front of us. And then we'll start adding the petals in the usual way. So with the curl of the petal on the stem facing upwards, we'll align the very first petal on the bottom row, on the left hand side of the bottom row, so that it sits level with the base of the petal on the stem. Then bind that in place. And the second petal we'll place directly opposite the one we've just placed on the stem. Again, line it up at the base and then bind it in place. And for all of the other petals, in the usual way, we'll align the middle of the new petal to the very edge of the previous petal. Now you'll notice that the first 4 petals are all curled inwards, and this creates a lovely little effect as if the flower is starting to open up. And all the rest of the petals, as you add them, the curls will be alternated, and it creates quite a lovely effect with the petals. And as always, when we get to the last petal, we'll add it in exactly the same way. And just wind the thread round a few more times. And then use the wallpaper paste to seal off where the thread is and leave it overnight to dry. So that's the basics for the English rose, and the mini roses are just the same, but we use petal shape number 2. So in the next video in the Bouquet Toolkit, I'll be showing you how to make the coloured paper roses. The processes are very similar, but the coloured paper roses are slightly harder if the paper is thicker. So thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I hope to see you all again soon.